everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bill, yo.
Thank you for that lovely intro. So about a year ago, I joined a company called Shopify. Now, how many people are here familiar with Shopify? Just sort of show of hands. Okay, wow, awesome. Now, for those of you that might not be familiar with Shopify, Shopify is a commerce platform. It helps you sell things online, offline, and through various channels like social media and marketplaces. Now, historically, Shopify has been focused on small business and entrepreneurs. And by focusing on this market, Shopify actually grew really, really big, really, really fast. So I want to give you context for what that actually means, really, really big, really, really fast. So in 5 years, Shopify went from 24 million in revenue to over 600 million in revenue. In 2013, we did 1.6 billion in GMV. In 2017, that was 26 billion in GMV. And GMV is gross merchant value. That's how much our customers actually sold on the Shopify platform. There's over 3,000 employees at Shopify. 50% of them, over 50% of them started after me. Now remember, I just told you I started about a year ago. So think about that for a second and think about the environment that you're in that case. And there's about 600,000 merchants across 175 countries worldwide. Now, here's the thing. Yes, this is impressive, but I'm not telling you this to brag about how great Shopify is. The reality is, none of this was me. I was not there for any of that. I've only been there for the last year. But this sets the stage and really gives you guys an idea of the size, scope, scale, and speed at which Shopify is operating. Now, all of those small businesses that we talked about that Shopify was focused on, while Shopify was growing, those small businesses were also growing really, really big, really, really fast. And they were actually turning into really big businesses. So some of them were doing tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So the question for Shopify was really, hey, what's happening up here? These companies are growing really big, and one of two things would happen. Either they would graduate and they would go to an enterprise e-commerce platform, or they would actually stay on Shopify, and they would figure out a way to make it work. So how do we actually keep those customers? That was the question. How do we mitigate that churn? How do we put together a package and offering a service that actually meets the requirements of those specific customers? And really, that's where Shopify Plus came in. Shopify Plus started as an experiment in Shopify around, hey, how do we keep these big guys? What do we do for them? Now, something really interesting happened here. We actually started seeing people migrate from competitor platforms over to Shopify Plus. And then we started looking at that space, and we actually saw that there was a huge gap in the market. So, rinse and repeat, Shopify Plus grew really, really big, really, really fast, and largely on the backs of a sales team. So how many of you here have ever worked with a sales team before? Okay, yeah, we have a good mix of people. Amazing. You guys are going to really like this. I'm going to make fun of sales a lot today. So if you scale sales really fast with no marketing, problems happen. And that was kind of the scenario that we were walking into here. So when I joined a year ago, I joined to build the marketing team, and I was largely starting from scratch, sort of. There was a few things happening. There was a blog, there was some paid stuff happening, there was some SEO stuff happening, but you guys, it was a marketer's dream. When I was trying to figure out, hey, am I going to do this? Am I going to join Shopify? I had a little checklist, and it hit all of the points on my checklist. Lead volume, check. Lots of leads. Lead volume was not the problem. There was a palpable market pull for what Shopify Plus was doing. Database, big fat database, lots of people to activate. People, can I hire? Yeah, Hannah, hire all the people. Awesome. Team went from 2 to 26 in under 12 months. Budget, yep, we've got budget. So I walked in, and I was like, I got this. No problem. 3 weeks later, this was me. 6 weeks later, I felt like I was chasing a fucking fire hose, which is really hard, by the way. Look at that guy. So the problem with having all of this white space, all of this opportunity for optimization across everything is that it comes inherently with a whole lot of challenges. So challenge number one, low-hanging fruit. Now, I know what you guys are saying, Hannah, low-hanging fruit is actually a good thing. I know it's a good thing, but the problem when you have low-hanging fruit everywhere is that every time you turn around, you are hit in the face with low-hanging fruit. It becomes a distraction, and sometimes it masks really important fundamental problems that you actually need to address. That's the first problem with low-hanging fruit. Second problem with low-hanging fruit, it makes it incredibly hard to prioritize. And the CRO in all of us just wants to go and start optimizing all the things. Sometimes that's not the smart play. Third problem with low-hanging fruit is expectations. It's low-hanging, it's easy to do. Not so easy to do if you don't have the infrastructure in place to do it. So low-hanging fruit, that was one challenge. Next challenge, pent-up demand for marketing. So the Shopify Plus team was scaling, sales, operations, all of these teams. Marketing took longer to hire, but stuff would pop up that would fall under marketing's domain. So you know what people would say? Let's just wait for marketing. So lots of stuff come up. Sales was getting creative. For all of you who have worked with the sales team, they were making up their own pitch decks and messaging, and some of it was brilliant, and some of it had you actually scratching your head a little bit. All the things changed, of course. About a month after I joined, we made a pretty fundamental shift in our pricing that actually changed how we needed to market and sell Shopify Plus. We went from transaction-based selling to value-based selling, totally different thing. So not only were we building marketing, we were also figuring out how to sell things in this whole new world. And of course, Plus was different from the rest of Shopify. So if you're familiar with Shopify, Shopify has more of a B2C model historically, right? If you're really catering to a small business, it's like free trial, upgrade, it's low touch, it's that kind of funnel. It's a different thing than if you're catering B2B, where you have a sales team. The funnel is different, the growth mechanisms are different, it's high touch, it's longer sales cycles. You're optimizing different things at this stage. So all of those challenges really sort of came into play. So what we had to do is go back to basics, really foundational stuff. So that came down to two things. Number one, positioning, but more importantly, how do we operationalize that across an org that is changing and scaling incredibly quickly? Number two, funnel. Not just optimize a funnel, but what is our funnel? Those were the questions that we were asking. So we're going to go through a lot of the lessons learned, strategies, tactics. We're going to zoom out, zoom back down quite a bit over the course of this, and would love to chat with you guys as we go through this even a little bit more afterwards. So first lesson learned, words matter. Now, I know you guys are like, we've heard this, we know this. Yes, we all know this. However, most of us don't internalize this, and the place this shows up most is in your positioning, your messaging, the value prop work, the copy on your website. So when I walked into Shopify Plus, I walked in all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I was like, okay guys, tell me, how do we position Shopify Plus? Actually show me the thing that tells me how to position it. That's what I was met with, silence. Nobody said anything, because there was no thing, right? And arguably, the thing had to change because all of the shifts that we went through earlier. So I'm going to take you through the framework for how we actually started to build that out and how we operationalize it. But before we do that, let's actually get really clear on what positioning is in the first place. Now, I emailed a friend of mine when I was prepping for this, and her name's April Denford. She talks a lot about positioning. She writes about it. She's writing a book on it. I said, April, send me your best definition, because I'm kind of lazy and I don't want to make it up myself if there's already a good one out there. So this is what she sends me. Marketing is about making it easy to find, evaluate, and buy your product. Positioning is figuring out what your product is in the first place. 2 minutes later, I got another email from April. I have a better definition. Marketing can polish a turd. Positioning is turning turds into fertilizer. Now, think about that for a second. That is magical, right? You're taking something that's kind of gross and off-putting, and you're turning it into this thing that's life-giving and growth-promoting. That is positioning. So it comes down to how do people think about your product, and more importantly, how do they actually talk about your product? Before I joined Shopify, I was at a company called Uberflip. It was a content marketing platform. When I started, very early days, we were focused on small business. We shifted way up market. We were focusing on enterprise. We were selling to really big companies. And through that process, we had to reevaluate our positioning. And then the founder says, wait, I've got it. Uberflip is a lightweight CMS for content marketers. Okay, technically that's correct, right? But keep in mind, we are now selling to enterprise buyers. Uberflip is a lightweight CMS for content marketers. What do you think enterprise buyers hear when they hear the term lightweight? Yeah, they don't hear user-friendly and fun, they hear shitty. They hear not robust enough for my big, bad enterprising needs. That's what they hear. That was problem number one. Problem number two, we are a lightweight CMS for content marketers. This is sales team. Hi, we're a lightweight CMS for content marketers. CMS, we use WordPress. Click. Well, wait, it's not like WordPress. We integrate with WordPress. Come back. That's what happens, right? Really hard to change a perception once it's already formed. That is why positioning is really important. So here's what happens in most marketing teams when they try and do positioning. And I have been involved in this. They get into a room with a whiteboard. They start thinking about all sorts of creative things like unicorns and ice creams and rainbows, except my unicorn's not showing up, unfortunately. And then they share these creative things with the rest of their team. Pretty much the rest of the team starts to talk about it too, and then the whole company is talking about unicorn and ice cream and rainbows. This is what happens in most companies. It's crazy, right? I've been in those rooms. I've puked up rainbows. It's not good. We have to get more systemic about how we approach positioning, because this is the foundation of all the things. You need to look at what are the inputs that are actually going to do it. Marketing teams don't make up positioning. Marketers uncover what it is based on a whole bunch of inputs and data. So for B2B SaaS, it might be things like your internal teams, your customers, the customers that you lost. Those are the people that you actually need to talk to. Website data, campaign data, market insights. There's all sorts of things you can look at to uncover what your positioning is and if it's actually where you want to be in the market. So I'm going to share a framework with you guys. I'm going to go through this a little bit quick, but happy to dig into with you later. So number one, really explain what the thing is in the first place. And yes, that means, whoa, that's weird. That means no unicorns, rainbows, or ice cream. Number two, really be specific about who it's for. Everybody here knows that the entire world is not their target market, but most of us act like they are. So get really specific here. Understand what category you're focused on and whether or not this is a new or an existing category. We're going to dig into this one a little bit. So when we talk about category, if you are looking at actually doing something or creating a new category, that is very different than actually disrupting an existing category. So when you do this, you really want to focus on something called demand generation, because it's more than likely that the people don't have an idea of what their problem actually is, and they need to articulate it. So there's a huge layer of education that happens there. Really great example. How many of you are familiar with Eloqua? Marketing automation platform. This was from the Wayback Machine, 2012, I think. You gotta love the copy. It's not luck, it's Eloqua. This was a pioneer in marketing automation at the time, right? It was not a thing that existed. Now, arguably, it's table stakes. There are almost too many marketing automation tools. This was a category creator. Dropbox is another one, helped define a category, right? Your approach to these types of things and how you actually message this is going to be fundamentally different than if you are in an established industry. If you're in an established industry, now it's about proving that you're better, right? They already get why the thing exists. You need to tell them why you're actually better. Warby Parker does a great job. Warby Parker met a huge amount of resistance initially because, hey, there's sunglasses everywhere. There's a market for it. There's a system. People buy it. Well, why are you going to be better? You know what? They're better because they went direct to consumer, and the experience is better, and the model was different, and they were able to do things that the incumbents weren't. How are you different? Be honest about that. Red flags to watch out for. If you're claiming to be the only, the best, or the number one, you better be able to back that up. Why should I care? This is basic stuff, values, benefits, and of course, alternatives. Remember, guys, when you're looking at positioning, it's all about context, right? Positioning is about the surrounding context of your product. Who your competitors are sends a signal to people in the market about where you are positioned in the market. So what do you do with all of this? Well, your messaging and your branding is actually an expression of your positioning. So now you've got this positioning statement, that needs to translate into something. Generally speaking, I like putting it into a messaging framework that all of the teams can then go leverage to create campaigns, to actually start to drive results, and then feed back into this and tell us how this thing needs to change. It's got to be a really tight feedback loop. So typically starting with the why, the guiding narrative, there's usually some secondary messaging that pulls out there, maybe just one secondary message, maybe several, depending on how complex your product is and what it is that you're actually doing. And this is the key. Most people stop at secondary messaging, but you need to layer on proof points. Prove that you're doing the thing that you're saying you're doing. You need to layer on a product story. Tell them how the product does the thing that you say you're doing that you just proved. And then, of course, all of the content supporting it. So for Shopify Plus, it's going to look like this. Hey, what's the big guiding narrative? It's that commerce is fundamentally changing. I think Brian proved that in the last presentation. But most merchants aren't keeping up with it. Great. How do we actually help with this? Our secondary messaging, we expand upon it for the sales team. By the way, every single person on the sales team gets this, right? We layer on the proof points, we layer on the product story, we layer on the content. This isn't meant to be the thing that fuels everything. We're not going to copy paste this on the landing page. This is the foundational doc, and it's got to be an ever-evolving thing. Both will and should evolve over time. Here's Dropbox again, Wayback Machine. I spent a lot of time on the Wayback Machine, 2010. Look at how they're positioned. Sync your files online and across computers. Very literal, very specific. 2010, very early to market, right? This was not mainstream yet. They had to be specific. Dropbox in 2017, they're reinventing teamwork. Totally different play, very aspirational, right? But they can do that now because the category has been created. So start to think about some of those things as you're looking at what you're doing. Next piece, balancing long-term and short-term impact. So remember that low-hanging fruit I talked about? So we're going to go through real quick just a few of the things that we touched on, because what I just talked about was really heavy lifting, really foundational work that's going to impact in a much longer way, but we still need to do stuff to make an impact short term. So for us, because we're B2B SaaS, that really came down to 5 things. It came down to better lead qualification, website optimization, form optimization. I like to call this sales team optimization. It's a thing. And we started sending emails. Crazy. Remember that big database I told you? So just incidentally, I thought this was funny, so I threw it in here. Here's what happens when you hire a marketing team. They just start sending a whole bunch more emails, which is kind of nuts. So a lot of the initial experimentation that we did and initial optimization we did really came down to 3 things: context, consistency, and relevance. That's it, those 3 things. So really great example. There was a link somewhere on Shopify's website that pointed to a form for Shopify Plus. The link said, learn more. This was basically the form. There was nothing else there. You got there and you're like, support, am I going to sales? What is this? Are you creating a Spotify account for me? Shopify, Spotify, that happens a lot. So we just added a little context. It's not rocket science. It's stuff you've probably done before, right? But these are the types of low-hanging fruit where we could implement pretty easily, and we could actually see an increase in form fills because of better context and a more relevant experience. Same thing with the main website. We have sections about specific use cases and specific product solutions. So for each one of those, we customize the experience. You go to a page that customizes for that. You get to a form that's customized for, in this case, wholesale. We saw lifts across the board. Again, not rocket science, but keeping it relevant, consistent, and contextual for the user. This was probably the thing that got the most, I would say, love from the sales team, of course. Created a big toolkit for sales. We took all of that foundational work and we started to operationalize it across. You guys will have these slides. You can go through all of those different things, and you can see what the different elements are that we did for the sales team. Now, speaking of sales teams, this is a thing, facts don't change minds. This is a thing that I know, but I forget sometimes. I just tell people facts and data, and marketers do this quite a lot. So this is true for your customers, but also true for your sales team. Now, I want you guys to imagine a scenario where sales rep gets leads, and they have a little bit of information about the lead, right? One of the things that they know is lead source. In this case, it's AdWords. He gets on the phone with a bunch of these leads, and he has terrible conversations, doesn't convert any of them. So he concludes AdWords leads are bad. Okay? What happens when one salesperson says something? This is what happens right here, right? And then all of a sudden, all the sales reps say AdWords leads are bad, right? So what does the marketing team do? We're going to show them the data. The AdWords leads you follow up on, actually, yeah, look, they actually do convert. But they don't care because they have their own data, right? Based on the conversations that they've had, based on the experiences that they've had, based on the story they've been telling themselves. So the marketing team ends up looking like this, and they don't fully understand that the sales team didn't have the context. Sales didn't understand that AdWords leads today are not the same as AdWords leads 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago. The campaigns changed, the keywords that we're targeting changed, all the things change on a regular basis. They didn't know that. This lead source bias was actually ingrained into their story, and they passed it on to all of the new reps as they started onboarding, right? So this was a huge problem. So we ran a test because we wanted to validate that it actually wasn't the lead source itself. It was actually the behavior that was happening when they saw the lead source. So we relabeled AdWords leads with Contact Us, which was just another lead source that the sales team really, really liked. And something really magical happened. If Contact Us was converting up here for how many deals that the sales team was opening, and AdWords was here, over the course of a month, slowly started to creep up. And then they were about equal. Pretty crazy, right? So we were able to take that information, we were able to create a new narrative, we were able to work with the sales team to really make them understand what that actually meant for the behavior of the sales team. Half our job is actually incentivizing sales rep behavior. And if you're in B2B SaaS, you need to think of it that way. So this made us question, hey, does lead source actually even matter? Is this even a thing we should be surfacing? And this brings me to the next point. Context is king. What actually matters more for a sales team when you're optimizing across a marketing and growth funnel? Well, what's more meaningful here, guys? Is it more meaningful that they actually converted on a landing page all about multi-channel e-commerce and they had lots of examples and they learned how the product works? Or is it more important that lead source equals AdWords? It's obvious, right? So what kind of information do we try to surface now for that type of a team? Now, it's landing page copy. That's way more important than where they actually came from. Search query, if you can get that, hugely beneficial for the sales rep as they're actually reaching out. You're optimizing for a conversation here, which can be incredibly difficult. What is the tech stack of the customer, if that's relevant for you? Demographic and behavioral info, that's table stakes. That needs to be surfaced as well. So really understanding what it is that you're putting in front of them. Next point, asking the right questions. So as a marketer, you've probably walked into a room and been hit with this question before. And replace leads with traffic, with like users, with anything. How do we get more, right? How do we get more leads? How do we get more traffic? How do we get more of something? Well, I would argue that that is not the right question. And the reality is in B2B SaaS, when you're targeted, it's definitely not the right question. The question you want to ask is how do we get the desired outcome with the least amount of leads possible, right? Because that speaks to conversion, that speaks to quality, that speaks to the fact that you're getting the right people to your website. So this is a thing that, again, sales reps say, every sales rep ever, I don't have enough leads. And yeah, maybe sometimes that's true, maybe sometimes it's bullshit, maybe. So this required a lot of discussion, but we essentially came back to them and said, hey guys, we're gonna give you less leads, but they're gonna be a lot better. Right? This goes against the face of what almost every marketer tries to do. Every marketer tries to do more of stuff and get more, right? But you have to actually drill down and understand what it is and what the desired outcome is. So this is just one example of an experiment we run. We've run about a dozen in the last 3 months. All of them have led to a drop in lead volume, every single one of them. But almost all of them, not all of them, almost all of them also led to a significant increase in the number of deals that the reps were opening, in the pipeline, in the actual dollar value. This is what we were aiming for, right? So in this particular example, we just added a field to the form, and we said, hey, what's your annual revenue? Really simple, it's like one buying signal that we use, 15% drop in leads generated from that form, but again, increase in the number of deals created, not conversion. Be careful there, in the number of deals created. So how do you get to the desired outcome with the least amount of leads, traffic, insert whichever your metric is there, possible? It's not about more, it's about better. So just to pull it all together, we talked about a few different ideas today. We talked about asking the right questions. We talked about setting context. We talked about combining facts and stories to really have a much more meaningful impact, particularly if you're working across really big teams and across teams that scale incredibly quickly. We talked about balance. How do you balance building for the long term with actually making a short-term impact? That can be incredibly difficult in an environment that's somewhat chaotic. And how are you articulating your company, your product, your value prop internally with your teams and operationalizing it, but also externally? And the thing is, all of these points really come down to one thing that I want to leave you guys with: clarity of purpose. So in any environment, this is the key to pushing your ideas and pushing the actual goals forward. Really be clear on what it is that you're trying to do. If there was an assumption that we were trying to increase leads, there's no way we would have been able to get away with a whole bunch of initiatives to decrease them unless we had clarity of purpose and alignment across the board. Thank you.